With service second to none, Deary Brothers Lincoln of Iowa City has been earning the business of customers in Johnson County and the surrounding area since 2010. Deary Brothers Lincoln is a full-service dealership offering new Lincoln custom orders with a dedicated sales, service, and parts department. They are proud to be here for you. As a happy customer, the entire Deary staff was unbelievable to work with. They found the vehicles our family was looking for, and we will definitely be doing business with them in the future. Check out Deary Brothers Lincoln on Facebook and follow them on Twitter at Deary Bros. Hello and welcome to the Leave Your Legacy podcast. I'm your host, Kenya Murray, and today's episode, we have the man that put Hall of Fame coach Don Showalter on the map, Jordan Montgomery of Montgomery Companies. Welcome to the podcast.
That's a great intro, man. It's a great intro. I wasn't ready for that one. We're setting that the show.
Yeah.
You remember what you said? I just shared this with Show. Remember we were driving up to Minneapolis?
Yeah.
And you were like, so what kind of a player was Jordan?
Yeah.
He said he was a great teammate. That's what he called.
I was like, he had to average. The way you talk, you're a good athlete. I figured you averaged 20.
He said if Jordan was averaging 20, we were in trouble. If we needed him for 20, we were in trouble.
Oh my gosh, man.
I don't know if he ever scored 20.
Oh gosh, just gems. That was awesome. Be able to spend that time.
That was a good time, man.
So
that's fun. That's a good trip.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, so you are from small town Iowa. I mean, you're from Amish country.
Come on, man.
Amish country.
Center of the universe.
I can't even talk. Got me laugh so hard. From Amish country. So, I mean, seriously, like, how was it growing up in a small town? Obviously, you had a ton of experiences. You travel all over the place now. But, I mean, you're an Iowa guy. You're an Iowa Hawkeye fan. I mean, tell us about growing up here in the state.
Yeah, man. So Kelowna, some people don't know this, but they need to know. We got to make this known. Kelowna is the largest Amish community west of the Mississippi River. So wow. that is our claim to fame. It's a one stoplight town. For those who haven't been, I loved growing up there, man. It was awesome.
Yeah.
It was just it was an easy childhood in the sense that, we had a lot of great people around us. I grew up in the church, had a great family life. We played sports at a level where, if you can walk and chew bubble gum, you get playing time. So yeah. I gotta play football and basketball, and those are kind of my two sports. Anyway, it was a great, it was a good upbringing. And then I went to the University of Iowa when I graduated. So
yeah. No, man. Yeah, it's funny because you and I talk a lot about like just kind of where we're from, like the things we've gone through. But I think your story is really interesting. So after Iowa, was it an immediate ascension into financial planning, or did you have a few other things that you did before that? Because I know that was kind of, that was where we met originally, was with the financial planning thing. So, So after graduation, kind of take us through that.
That was it, man. So I graduated from college, and I should have said this. So my dad was a blue collar business owner growing up. He owned a little painting business. I think maybe you knew that, but my mom was a school teacher. Dad was a business owner. And so from the time I was really young, I thought I just want to own a business, because I want to be like my dad. I want to be able to have autonomy in my life and be able to control my own time. My dad was at every one of my games, all of my events. He never missed anything. Wow. And so I just remember thinking like, I want to be able to lead my family that same way. So I thought I would go to the University of Iowa to just have fun, meet people. Like, I'll do the social thing, I'll get a degree, but then I'll start my own business.
Right.
But then I got out of college and I realized, I'm like, I don't have any experience. I have no money. I was dead broke. Paid for my own school, so I was just in student loan debt. I had worked all through college, so I had learned work at a young age, but I needed to find an opportunity that would still allow me to create something where I didn't have to invest a bunch of money. So financial services became that. I was in business for myself and out by myself, so I had good support. So I launched into that industry as soon as I graduated, and yeah, man, it was a really good run.
Well, and the thing out there is, people that are in financial planning, they can make a pretty good living for themselves. And jumping into that right after college, I liken it to an 18-year-old getting drafted first round of the NBA. You have an opportunity to make a lot of money at a young age. Was that kind of what happened with you? And because I know you end up leading your own team, and so you saw success early out of college.
Yeah, I'll just tell you the story. The story, but we can go a little deeper on it. So yeah, 22 years old, I just started working like around the clock, and I fell in love with the work. I really did enjoy the work, but work also became my idol. Like all of my identity was wrapped up in my achievement, my status, my bank account, and I became addicted to like winning at work. And so by the time I was 25 years old, after 3 years of doing that, I just woke up in this world that I didn't really recognize. And I didn't grow up with money. Nobody ever really taught me how to manage money or steward money. Hashtag financial advisor. So here I am as this financial advisor without a real understanding of how to manage my own money. And here's what I was. I was a person who was underdeveloped and overexposed. Like my character wasn't keeping pace with my influence. So all of a sudden I was in these rooms and I was leading these teams, but I didn't really understand who I was. And it's the whole idea that if you don't set your values before you set your goals would take you to a place that you didn't intend to go.
Right.
And that was my story. Like I just, I didn't really know who I was. I wasn't really slowing down to consider other really important areas of my life, like who I was becoming spiritually.
Yeah.
Who I was becoming, relationally. It was just really all about my job. And then at 27, April 1st, 2015, my whole life changed.
Yeah.
So I think that's maybe what you wanted me to share, but that was the rise. Yeah.
No, and I think, but I think all of us can look back to being 24, 25-year-old and really trying to figure out who we are, like who really knows who they are at 24, 25. As we look at, I look at my own kid jumping into the NBA as a professional athlete at 22 and him trying to figure that out. I couldn't imagine not having the guidance in that. But, like you said, things happen, things change, and you grow. So share with our listeners and our viewers what that date meant to you and how it changed the whole fabric of who you are and what you become.
Happy to share that. And I'll also say that guidance, my dad did teach me a lot. My mom and dad taught me a lot, but there was never really a conversation about that part of my life. Right. And I've watched you manage that so well. You and Michelle have done such a great job, I think, of teaching your kids in that space, man. I'm serious. Like the way that you've prepared them for the situation they're in now is really unique and special. So shout out mostly to Michelle, but a little bit to you
absolutely.
Too.
She's done well by us.
No, you guys have been just awesome role models that way. So April 1st, 2015, I get a call from my boss. He's like, hey, I need to talk to you today. And I was like, well, I don't have time. Maybe we can schedule something later. I was so naive, Kenyon. Like, I'm just such an idiot. And I literally was irritated that I had this like mandatory meeting that I had to go to that day. And he's like, it's the kind of meeting you make time for. And I was like, okay, well, somebody on my team did something stupid. Like it definitely wasn't me.
Right.
And I'll never forget what he said. He said, today's going to be your last day. So he told me that early on in the conversation. He said, when you're casual, you create casualties. And today you're the casualty.
Wow.
And the reality is my life was just moving so fast. Like the pace was unhealthy. I was missing things. I didn't dot I's. I didn't cross T's. And he said, while it wasn't malicious or intentional, you've got a careless spirit. And I did. I just had a careless spirit.
Yeah.
Because when you're pursuing things like money and status and achievement, it's hard to pay attention to the things that really matter. And again, my character just wasn't being developed. So nobody really got hurt in the process. It wasn't like I was doing anything malicious, but one of the things that happened was there was a staff member on my team that took a test, the story, on my behalf. And I didn't report it when I found out about it. So it was this internal continuing education assessment. That can't happen.
Right.
Probably could have been like a slap on the wrist. Hey, don't do that again. But I think my boss at the time felt like you just got too many issues that there's too many red flags, with your pace and your speed and your character. And so we're going to have to part ways. And to add to job loss, I was tied up in some real estate deals that weren't structured properly. It was sort of tied to my employment status. And so not only did I lose my job, I lost millions of dollars overnight, just kind of bled out financially. My deal was really public. There was an email sent to everybody inside that company. So everybody knew what had happened to me. And for a young person that just found all of his identity and achievement and status in my bank account, it just rocked me from the inside out. So, I kind of went into like hiding. I had hundreds of text messages that I just never returned because I couldn't really deal with all the questions about what happened.
Yeah.
And it rocked me, man, real good.
And if you think about it now, you look back in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't probably as bad as it seemed to you in that moment, right?
That's right.
Yeah, like you said, you didn't dot the I's and cross the T's, but it was one of those things that could have been a slap on the wrist, but obviously your supervisor at the time went the way he went. But, I think out of bad comes good. And I think your story talks about like even though you had that hiccup, you have people that are support you because you have people that stepped up and said, hey, I know who you are. I know how hard you work. You know, I believe in you. And you were able to kind of pick yourself up by your bootstraps, but that meant you had to move to Minnesota, right?
Yeah, man, I moved to Minnesota. This guy by the name of Tim Bohannon kind of took me in, said, I'd love to give you a second chance inside that same company. So he took me in, but I didn't have any of my clients. So my clients stayed with that former organization, even though I worked at the same company, which was a little bit confusing. But I look back now, it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I was forced to work on myself. I didn't have that book of business that I could just focus on and get lost in. And so, you know, sometimes it feels like you've been buried when it's dark, but I wasn't buried, I was planted. Yeah. And God's preparation is sometimes packaged as pain and like it hurt like hell.
Yeah.
But I was being prepared for a different season and you know the season that I'm in now. And so for those listening that don't know my story, 2 years in a desert season, trying to understand myself, learn about myself. And the whole time I'm thinking, God's preparing me for the next professional opportunity. Right. Like everything I'm learning is preparing me to be the next, you know, leader of whatever financial services firm. And the reality is God was preparing me to be a dad and a husband. Yeah. And so in that season, I met this gal named Ashley. She had 2 children, Audrey and Claire. They were 5 and 3 at the time. And Audrey and Claire today are my 2 oldest daughters. Yeah. And so, man, we get married. I meet them at a really special and unique time in life and got to become dad in their life. And we've got a child now, Olivia, who you know very well. Yeah. It's crazy. Yes. And super fun. And then we have a baby due any day. So I have number 4.
I got to have Olivia make me one of her drinks.
Oh, you do not want to taste the drinks. You might fall over dead. It's like 1 million grams of sugar.
Take a drink and I get diabetes right away.
Yeah, go to the doctor.
Oh, man. You know, we talk about a lot. Like, you know, we have a little group of friends that we communicate with all the time. But one of the things we all talk about is just how special our wives are to us and how they balance us out. Like, you know, obviously you met Ashley, but, you know, part of who you are as a husband and a father, you know, you're leaving a legacy, but, you know, sometimes part of that is what that other person's given to us so that we can also share and leave. So, I mean, what is Ashley, like, how does she balance you out? Like, what would be, let me rephrase it. If you could describe her in one word, what would that word be? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
No, it's good. It's good. Yeah, I would say driven. She's really driven. Just has a really high standard for how she lives her life and cares for people, carries out her daily activities. Still to this day, she's the most driven person I've ever spent time with. Like she's having a baby any day. She was up at 4:00 this morning, worked out, got our kids ready, ran our business. I mean, every day. She just, and part of that then holds me accountable. It's really challenging, you know? Yeah. Like if you wake up at 5 and your wife is out of bed and she's been out of bed for an hour and she's growing a child and you're growing no one, you can feel like a slouch pretty quick, you know? So like we got married and all of a sudden my wake up time was like way earlier. Yeah. I became more disciplined. I started working out harder. I ate better. Like she just has forced me to level up in so many areas and probably more than anything, like our family time, you know this because Michelle's the same way. Like they're really grounded. Absolutely. And part of that is they love their families really, really well. And although we love our families really, really well, us guys have been distracted by other things. You know, like it's easy for me to get distracted by the social thing or the event or the friend or the you know, and so I think for me, like Ashley's kept me really, really grounded. Yeah.
And the thing is I love about you too, is like whatever you're doing, if she's involved, obviously she's a lot behind the scenes of what you do, but you always acknowledge her. And sometimes I think we need to not only acknowledge people like that in our lives. I mean, our wives are people we should acknowledge all the time, but the one thing you do is you acknowledge people really well. People joke about whenever Jordan makes you feel like you're the most important person in the room. And I think we need to see more of that. There's just not a lot of people that like are willing to acknowledge other people's good parts. And I think it's why we suffer so much with who we are, how do I identify myself, or I got to live up to this standard or that standard. I think you make it very intentional to acknowledge people when you're around them. And I think that's a special quality that a lot of people don't have. And so where does that come from?
Well, I think you have that in spades, you know? Like, remember, I always tell the story, the football game that we went to. I know I always bring this up, but it's just such a good story. Our listeners need to hear this. Your listeners need to hear this. So we go to this football game. Was it last year?
Yeah, it was last year.
Last year. We go to this football game. I'm like, hey man, when's the last time you've been to a football game? And you're like, it's been a really long time. And I remember thinking, that's strange. Like, you love the Hawks. Yeah. Like, you're in the area. Like, why don't you go to games? I didn't really challenge you. I was like, oh, it's interesting. And then we're like 10 minutes into tailgate, and I'm like, I understand why you don't go to football games. Yeah, you were getting stopped every 30 seconds. But it was by a lot of these people that you don't know. And they know everything about you, and you know nothing about them. But bro, you were so gracious for like 6 hours. It was like hours of tailgating, hours at the game. You had people like asking all kinds of questions and giving you advice. But like, I think part of what I've learned from you is you just never know who you're talking to, right? Like, absolutely. Who needs your encouragement? Who needs your attention? And the reality is, you know, John Gordon says this. He's like, I'm not positive because life is easy. I'm positive because life is difficult. And I think you and I have both been positioned in different ways to reach people. And I'd like to think there's a humility. There's for sure a humility inside of you that's kept you grounded. And there's been this reminder, like, people need you, man. Yeah. And that small conversation where you listen to them or you encourage them, can change everything, you know? So,
I mean, and that's, you hear Chris and Keegan kind of echo that too, right? It's one of those things, like we talk about it. When they signed with Iowa, I told them, you have to be ready for this. Everybody's going to know everything about you, and you're not going to know anything about them, but you never know who you're talking to, because sometimes that relationship comes back around, or that person needed the conversation that you had with them. They needed someone to take the time with them that day, because you don't know where someone else is mentally, spiritually, or anything like that. And sometimes the way that fans, especially young kids, look up to these athletes, like, you may say something that changes that person's life, and you never know it. So I think it's important that we all do that. And it's so much easier to tear people down nowadays. I mean, I couldn't imagine being a teenager, you know, coaching 15 and 16-year-old girls. I know that's going to be something I have to deal with, but I just think, like, if every other person just said something nice about somebody else, like, it just make this world a much better place.
Yeah, man.
Honestly.
Just be kind, right? Like, just be kind. And I think that's what will get said about Keegan and Chris, right? Like, at the end of their days, like, this whole thing's about legacy. Yeah. Their legacy will be rooted in kindness, you know? And that's a special thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I'd rather them be known as good people as opposed to good basketball players. But the fact that they can do both, then, you know, thank you, God. Yeah. You know, for that one. So, well, you know, people don't know, like, our relationship's unique, but it also includes a couple other people. We have our circle of trust. That's right.
You named it. It's a good name.
Yeah, circle of trust. You know, but the one thing that I think success has shown, I think, for all of us, is that we all have a really tight circle of people that we lean on. I don't know if you were talking about it. I think it might have been on one of your leadership calls. You're talking about, like, we're more connected now than we've ever been, but the people that are closest to us is really, really small. And I think that's a hard thing for people to understand, especially an athlete, right? And trying to figure that out. So, like, I'm just saying, like, how do you maneuver that? Because you talk to so many people, you're always out there, you're always talking, but I mean, how many true friends that you could share everything with do you think you have, even though you talk to hundreds of thousands of people every year?
Man, like, very few. Yeah. I think I always prided myself on having, like, a lot of friends. I thought that was, like, the cool thing, to have a lot of friends. And now more than ever, I'm really proud of having, like, a small circle of people that I can trust. And you're in that circle, you know, and it's really small, but by design. I learned this recently. Carrie Newhoff was talking to me the other day about having real friends and deal friends. Yeah. And I think the reality is, like, we don't even realize that a lot of our friends are not real friends, they're deal friends. Yep. There's some sort of string attached, and it's because you work together, or you share a common interest, or you're part of the same group. And then I have a few friends that call me just to say, like, what's up? How are you? Yeah. What's going on in your world? Or I saw this thing with your kid. Yeah. Or how's Ashley doing? And you're one of those people for me. Yeah. And I don't have a lot of friends that just do that. They don't want anything. They're not trying to, like, plan something. They're just, like, checking in, you know? Yeah. And I think as you get older, man, you just learn to value those relationships so much more. Just the people who are just real, authentic, they care for you. And I think, man, there's a difference between real friends and deal friends.
Yeah. And that was one of the hardest conversations I had to have with Chris and Keegan with everything that's going on. I said, the reality is with you where you are, your status, your profile, like your circle of friends is going to shrink. And what's beautiful about the two of them, they've had the same two best friends since they were 5 years old. I don't think a lot of people can say that, but I recently had a conversation with a friend whose son just committed to a university, and I told her the one thing she has to prepare her son for is the fact that his circle of friends is going to shrink. And I don't know how a teenager can even, compartmentalize that. Like, no, I got all these friends, all these people like me. It's like, no, like you're saying, deal friends and real friends. And they want to be around you because of what you do, not who you are. And that's hard for young people to figure out. And it's hard for adults too, because adults get burned too.
That's right.
So that's right. No, that's good. But no, David Nurse, Mark Wise, those are our dudes. And I think I've probably been the one that's been the luckiest because I've spent time with all three of you at different times within the last month. And so
we see each other a lot for living in different states. Yeah. You and I are here in Iowa, but Mark's in Indiana, David's in California. Yeah. And we're together a lot.
I know, dude. It's great though, because I think we balance each other out, and I think we talk real with each other. I think as men, it's hard to be transparent and vulnerable with other men. And when you find some people like that, like I found it in my Bible study group, I actually just met this morning, I'm like the youngest in the group. They're like 60 and 70-year-old dudes, but it's fun. But I love the fact that I have that with you three, that we can talk about anything at any time. And there's always that support too. I think we're blessed to have those two in our life.
Oh man. Yeah. And I think also celebrate with each other.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to find friends in today's world that are like genuinely happy for what's going on in your world.
Absolutely.
Genuinely happy. And I know with the three of you, you will celebrate everything that's happening with me, and we'll celebrate everything that's happening for you. And it's that whole idea that hey, when you win, pay attention to who's clapping in your circle.
Absolutely.
And I'm proud to say the three of you are always clapping. Yeah. We're clapping for each other. And absolutely. That's a big deal.
Well, I'm gonna bring it back to being a dad. I had Daryl Moore from Iowa. He and I have been friends for 30 years. And we talked about becoming grandparents because our oldest is expecting. But he said his biggest joy is being a dad. And, I see that with you. Like you're so you don't talk after certain times on Friday. You're really committed to your girls. I mean, how has fatherhood changed you? And obviously now with another one coming into the fold, what are you looking forward to with that?
I think for one, our kids have been the greatest teachers in my life. They just keep you really humble. And I think back to what we were just talking about, the good part about kids is they're just the least impressed people in your life. Right. They just do not care about anything that you do or who you're friends with or what you they just love you for you. Yeah. But they're also quick to tell you what they think. And so,
absolutely.
And that, especially all the stories of the boys and Kenna. So, for me, I think it's that truth that's been really helpful. I think as you get older, you realize that truth trumps flattery.
Yes.
And you want to keep people in your life that share the truth and love you for you. And our girls are the least impressed people in my life. Mark Batterson said this, man. He said, in my life, I want to be respected the most by people who know me the best.
Yeah.
And that has really stuck with me, as I live out my days and think about the people that I'm spending time with and the people that we're fortunate enough to be around. Mm-hmm. Man, I could work really, really hard in my life to serve the opinion of a lot of people that I kind of know, barely know, and forsake my family. And when I get to the end of my days, when I think about legacy,
right,
I want to be able to say that the people who knew me the best respected me the most. And you have that in your life, man, because as much as you joke with your kids, they respect you so much, and I'm thinking about the interview that Keegan just did, and talking about what mom and dad taught him in humility and staying grounded. And that's not by accident. I think about his life, and now Chris is going through the same thing. At that age, to have that kind of attention on you and have people praise you and yet stay grounded and really know who you are, understand who you are is a unique thing. It should be normal, but it's not. It's really unique. And I think you and Michelle have worked really hard to build a relationship where they respect you and they want to be around you.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Well, we joke about it too. Because, Michelle and I went through our struggle. 5 years ago, we were contemplating splitting up and that kind of thing. And it put a toll on the family. But I think in that moment, the most important thing for me was that I was honest and open with the kids. And they saw, one, that relationships aren't easy. Their work, regardless of what the outside looks like, sometimes there's a lot of other things going on, and on the inside that aren't good or are a struggle. But I honestly feel that being transparent with them at that point in time probably made them respect me more, because I wasn't trying to be perfect, and I didn't say things I showed them that nobody's perfect. Even dad can screw up, and dad can admit his mistakes. And I truly believe like it was that moment where I feel like I earned more respect from them then.
Yeah.
And I felt like it's led into them, one, choosing the right people to be around, choosing the right path to take, and then having the people in their life that was going to help uplift them. Because I think Chris made a joke. He said, so Michelle's like, we went through our thing, and she always says, I'm so surprised we didn't screw you guys up. And Chris, and the only way Chris could say it, he goes, well, you almost did. And he walks out the door. like, dude, come on, So you're right. You do want the people that know you the best to respect you the most. And I think that's something that you definitely do, not only in your home, but with everybody else around us. And, I know getting ready for the podcast, I asked you to, what's your definition of legacy? And you kind of really laid it out. But I think the one thing everybody needs to understand is that it doesn't matter what you do, who you are, where you live, like you're leaving a legacy. And if you're you're not just a mom, or you're not just this, like you're someone that's passing something on, and your reach is so incredible now. And what you're building with Montgomery Companies is awesome. So what does that look like? What does the future of Montgomery Companies look like? And I don't even have really told people what you do, right? I mean, that's one of the things I think our viewers and listeners would like to understand is, what does Jordan Montgomery do that Ashley is in charge of?
Very little. I do very little. Well, the big joke about what I do is I run my mouth.
I heard you always
Ashley
been good at that
runs the
too.
business. Yeah, I run my mouth and it works out.
Yeah.
But as far as legacy, or thinking about like what we're gonna do at Montgomery Companies, for the first time in my life, I'm in this place where I'm trying to think less about that. And I think the reality is I've always had like destination addiction. I've always been really focused on the next thing, and I've missed a lot of moments because of that. I think I've just been a distracted person most of my life. I think there's some good to being a visionary, thinker, but and God put that in me, right? But learning to manage that has been a struggle, because you can spend a lot of time in a future that hasn't happened yet and miss a lot of really cool moments in the present. So when people ask me that, it's not like I don't have a vision. I think, we want to expand the company and impact and serve more people. But at the end of the day, like, I want to spend time with my kids. I want to do work that matters day to day, coach people that I care about. I want to speak at some events where I feel like I'm called to speak. I'm saying no probably more now than I ever have. That's a blessing to be able to say no. Not like, no, I don't want to, but just no, that doesn't fit. Right. I mean, I would love to speak at all events. The reality is I'm going to miss stuff with my kids if I say yes to that stuff. So I think just having a young family, I'm trying to lean in. I mean, I'm learning from people like you that have been there, done that. And I want to run that race well. And so I'm probably a little more focused on that area of my life than I am the professional area of my life. And I say that not to say like, I don't struggle with that, because I do. It's a major struggle. Like, the behind the scenes in our house is Ashley Montgomery saying, if you say yes to that, you're going to miss this thing. And I'm like, yeah, but I could do both. And she's like, no, you can't. And so like Michelle holds you accountable, like Ashley holds me accountable, but anyway, I think just professionally, I would say growing the company, impacting more people, and then saying yes where it matters. We've said this lately, like, no doesn't mean no forever. It just means no for now. Yep. And I'm in a season where I have to say no for now. More often than I'd like to say no, but that's the right thing, I think, given my responsibilities at home. Yeah. I mean, and you're saying no for the right reasons, and you can always plug in like, no, in this instance means next opportunity. Like, there's going to be an opportunity to do something like that again. It's just not the right time to do it now. And to be able to recognize that,
You talk about it, and I wrote this down. You're big into self-awareness, and that's one of the hardest things to manage, to acknowledge. And what do you do, like, to be self-aware? Like, do you have like a daily, like,
self-awareness is like humility. Like people that say they're really good at it are usually the ones that struggle.
Yeah. So is Ashley your monitor there?
So I got a lot of work to do. It's kind of like annoying people, It's like what makes people really annoying is that they don't know they're annoying.
Yeah.
That's why they're annoying. Yeah. So I think from a self-awareness standpoint, I mean, a few things, like here's some application, right? Yeah. So for listeners, I would say, here's a good question to ask. What is it like to be on the other side of me?
Right.
And then experience that when you can. It's going to sound weird. When you can, experience that.
Yeah.
Two ways. Number one is record yourself. So like in my line of work, I have to record a lot of our speeches, the presentations that I give. And one of my least favorite things to do is to watch that stuff because I'm my own worst critic, and I can just like get really stuck on something dumb that I said or something dumb that I did. So it's hard, but it's a great exercise in self-awareness because I'm able to review the game film, right? Like athletes watch game film, musicians watch game film. Most other professionals, they don't watch game film.
Yeah.
Salespeople, like they don't watch game film. They don't watch the way that they're connecting with the world. Nobody ever records that. They're not reviewing it. Yeah. And so we just say like, hey, watch the game film. If you have a meeting, if you're leading a team meeting, if you're listening in a team meeting, it's a one-on-one coaching meeting, it's a group meeting, like record it, watch it. And then the second thing would be just get more feedback than you get today. If I'm speaking to a group, I love to ask this question. I'll say, so let's say there's 100 people in a room. I'll say, hey, how many of you think you're getting all the feedback you need? Raise your hand. And like no hands go up.
Right.
And then the next question is, how many of you think feedback is critically important?
Everybody raise their hand.
All the hands go up. So it's proof that there's a gap in the amount of feedback that we receive as humans. And so I think the second challenge would be get more feedback from the people around you. And we're always getting feedback. It's not that we're not getting feedback. What we don't get is honest, helpful, and timely feedback. And that's what we need. We need it honest, we need it to be timely, and we need it to be helpful.
Yeah.
And so those would be two things, growing in self-awareness.
But I think, it goes back to, and the reason I asked you that question, because I think you have to understand that part to get to where you're talking about as far as moving the company forward, like the vision of it. You know what I mean? I think you have to be that, not only self-aware with yourself, but just kind of what the company is and where it wants to go. But you have to kind of sit back and say, okay, what's the vision? And then how will we get there in a way that's going to work with the way your life is rolling right now? Yeah. And you adding another one to the mix. So good luck on that.
Crazy, man. I know. We need the prayers.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So I got some rapid fire questions.
All right, let's do it.
Not really. I mean, but they are questions that I think, will definitely give our listeners and viewers some more insight onto you. Okay. So, and I think I know the answer to this question, but who has been the biggest influence on your life?
We technically have two answers. I'm going to go dead and alive. Dead. Jesus has had the biggest influence on my life.
Yeah.
So that's my guy.
Yeah.
I was lucky to grow up in a house where I knew him and then stepped into, I think, like a real relationship with him post-college.
Right.
And he got me through the toughest times of my life. And so that, Jesus has been my rock. Alive would be my dad.
Mm.
And man, I've been asked this question. I don't know, every time somebody asks me a question like that, I get emotional talking about my dad because my dad has just been a really ordinary, by worldly standards, most people would say he's just very ordinary.
Right.
He was a blue collar worker. He grew up in a small town. He's never really had much or done much from like a secular, worldly standpoint, but he's the most humble person that I know. I'll share this. My mom and dad split when I was really young, and I didn't know this, and this is common knowledge. So I have a great relationship with my mom, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was young, she made some decisions that were not smart, not wise. And so she lived a double life for a majority of my childhood.
Mm.
All that came out when I was a teenager. And so she's been forgiven. There's been reconciliation. But in that process, that entire process, I never heard my dad say a bad word about my mom. Not once. So he'd say stuff like she made poor decisions, or I don't agree with what, her decisions. So he would acknowledge that, but he would never like throw her under the bus or attack her character when he could have, right? Because the reality is she hurt my dad really bad. But like, I've just watched my dad live with grace and provide humility in such a distinct way. And so like for me, it's been the ultimate example of what it looks like to be a leader in the home and follow the Lord. And I think for guys like my dad, I think there's a really special place in heaven for a dude like that. Like I think my dad will get to heaven someday, and I think God is going to say like, well done, good and faithful servant.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. And I have heard that story, but it still gets me whenever
it's crazy, man. Yeah,
it.
It's wild. Me too.
Okay. We've talked about legacy, but I'm going to ask you, at this point in time, what are you most proudest of?
Yeah, I think, you go a few different directions with this answer, but I would say I'm really proud of our family, of specifically of my marriage and of our girls, man. Like, just feel really blessed. It's interesting because I'm in this situation where, and maybe you get this some with Demetrius, right? Yeah. Where people want to give you a pat on the back, like you did a good job, because Audrey and Claire are not biologically, my children, right? Although I'm their dad, right?
Yeah.
And so I think people are quick to say like, oh, hey, like good for them that you stepped into their life, and I'm the lucky one. Like I'm the one that won. Like I got two beautiful girls who've taught me so much, who love me so well, who allowed me to be a dad when candidly I wasn't really ready to be dad. Like and they've just been the biggest blessing in my life. And I have a wife who challenges me and drives me crazy some days, but on most days makes me just a better man. And I feel really fortunate to be married to a woman who's strong in her faith, strong for our family. Like Michelle, man, she's just solid. And so I'm proud of that. I'm proud of, it's far from perfect. We have all kinds of issues.
Oh yeah. All of us.
We do marriage coaching once a month. we just duke it out. Like it's just, we just get it all on the table, and it's messy. It's imperfect, but I'm really proud of it.
Yeah. If anybody says that theirs is perfect, then yeah.
Yeah. Then they have major issues.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. All right. If you could interview anyone from your life, living or dead, but not a celebrity, who would it be and why?
Yeah, this is a great question. I would interview anybody in my life. I would interview my grandfather. Mm-hmm. I don't know how my grandpa, he was in a tractor in a cornfield, or on the farm doing something for hours a day, like silent. Like he didn't talk people say that I'm like, my grandpa like hardly spoke. And my dad is gregarious and I'm gregarious. Everybody else in my family is kind of loud. My grandpa was just this like steadfast, solid, wise man.
Yeah.
And what I would ask him about, so he recently passed. And but what I would ask him about is like he had a real authentic relationship with Christ. Mm. And to me, I wish I could tap back into that. Like, Grandpa, what did that look like for you to hope in the Lord and wait on the Lord and trust the Lord? Because he did it better than anybody I've ever witnessed.
Right. And
he was just a man of great wisdom. And so I think to glean from his wisdom and to spend time with him, and so often when I'm getting tripped up in life about things that don't matter, I think about my grandpa, because he just didn't spend time or waste time on things that didn't matter.
Yeah.
And so it'd be my grandpa.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. No, I've enjoyed our conversation today. It's been absolutely incredible. I think people get to know why you're such a good friend to me, and why I love you so much. Like, your family, you got a built-in babysitter in McKenna anytime you need one.
Come on.
Because with the little one coming, you're going to need some time away. You have to have date night and stuff like that. But Jordan, thanks for being on the show today. Is there anything that you want to leave for our listeners and our viewers today?
I would say this, tune into this podcast. I love the work you're doing, man. And, you're one of the best at asking questions, being curious, and you're so intentional, man, with how you care for people. So, I love our friendship, our relationship, and I love that I get to do stuff like this with you. And if there's one thing that stands out about the Murray family, about you and Michelle, it's your humility. And I love that you're still doing normal things really, really well. And you're pouring your heart and soul into things that are basic, right? Like you're so passionate about this podcast, and you're going to be super passionate and already are really passionate about high school basketball and Coach McKenna. And you're passionate about connecting with community leaders on important causes. And like you're finding time to connect with average, ordinary, common people, you know, like myself. And I love that you, in light of everything that's happened for you and your family, you guys haven't lost sight of where you've come from. And I know that you'll never lose that. And so, yeah, man, that's what I want to share with our listeners.
No, I appreciate it. You know, and I think we talk about using the platform that we have to do good in this world. And I don't think there's enough people to do that. So I appreciate the words. And yeah, you know, I think I really get a lot of that from my mom and my grandma. Like, they were always women who helped everybody to this, you know. Obviously I lost my grandmother a while back, but she was somebody that just helped everybody, and that's where I get it from, and why we do what we do. But yeah, man, I appreciate you being on the show today.
Much love, man. Thanks for having me.
All right. As we end the show, I want to leave you with a quote from American poet and civil rights activist Maya Angelou. If you're going to live, leave a legacy. Make a mark on the world that can't be erased. A big thank you to Jordan Montgomery for joining us on the podcast. Please go to the Talk About Network on YouTube. Subscribe, give us a like, hit that notification, and select all. You can find this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Kenyon Murray. Until next time. This podcast is sponsored by Storyline Multimedia. Storyline is an Iowa City-based media company that specializes in creating high-quality video, photo, and audio productions for local businesses. Not only that, but they also produce a number of podcasts, including this one. So if you're interested in sharing the story of your business with the world, contact them today by visiting StorylineMultimedia.com. And remember, your story matters.